video. Episode 5 was a little bit long on the Gothic Cathedral, but listen, it had to be. Gothic cathedrals are extremely important, and you have to know the various parts. And one of the problems with Chart, it's one note card out of 250, but there's so many parts of it that you have to know. So that's why, when we talk about there being 250 images, there's really way more. And also now that we know because of the coronavirus, and we know that the units have been scaled down, and we are only really testing, it looks like, if we go back to school, units 1 through 6. I want to go into as much depth as possible so you guys have a good understanding of these pieces. So we are going to pick up in our last episode on Gothic art, on luxury arts created during the Gothic era. And just like in the early Middle Ages and in the Romanesque period, these luxury books, for the most part, are going to be religious texts, and they're going to be created by people working for the Catholic Church. And again, obviously, the more ornate and the more decorative that these are, the more wealthy the person was, and probably also their status also increased as well. So let's get started. So luxury arts and books of illumination. So Paris was the center of the production of fine books in the Gothic era. Dante, all right, from Dante's Inferno, had stated that Paris was the city famed for the art of illumination, and we'll see why. So one of the images that is interesting to look at and kind of harkens back to that idea that Chartres was not just a cathedral in the middle of a relatively medium-sized town, but it was also a center of learning. So this is an image from one of those illuminated manuscripts or moralized Bibles called God as the Architect of the World. And you have here, God in that gold background that we're used to. We have it framed out like we saw in the illuminated manuscripts of the very early Middle Ages. But we have some more realism here. We have some more detail. We're starting to see these artists shift away just from strictly a spiritual message to playing with more realistic tendencies. We see that here with the folds of the drapes, the detail in the feet, and as well as incorporating a compass. And it's meant to be God using a compass to create the perfectly, aligned circular heavenly bodies that are the heavens, right? So if you look, he's got like that moldy lump of clay in the middle, the gold disc. He's going to straighten that out and turn that into a perfect circle. So that's kind of an example of where Gothic art is at this period. Some artists will follow this more realistic version. Some will be a little bit more kind of stringent in keeping to the older Middle Age ways, but we'll see. We're going to bounce back and forth. So this one was created in the 1200s, and remember, so this is just a couple hundred years before the Renaissance begins. All right, so now back to a monarch that we have already talked about. So Queen Blanche is here in this dedication page from a moralized Bible. And they're pretty sure that this is Blanche and her son Louis. They're not 100% sure, but they believe that it is. Queen Blanche, again, is someone that we have already talked about. She helped to pay for, her and her husband paid for the windows and the transepts of the Chartres Cathedral after the fire. Remember, the fire was in 1194. This is taking place in 1226 to 1224 or 1234. They believe it was created. And these moralized Bibles were even more decorative than the illuminated manuscripts of the early Middle Ages. They would often have a couple sentences of text, and then they would have an image. So it was a way of really depicting visually the stories being told in the Bible and not just placing the imagery at the beginning of each chapter like a lot of the very early Middle Age illuminated manuscripts were. So what do we have here? We've got Queen Blanche, whose husband dies only a couple of years after he becomes king. We know that she is a widow at this point because she's wearing a white veil of a widow. She's got the ermine, the white fur behind her cloak, which again suggests her royalty. And then we have her son here to the right. And he's got the fleur-de-lis crown, he's got a scepter, and he also has some gold coins that he would be in a ceremony where he would have been coronated. He would have given these gold coins to the bishops of the Rheims Cathedral, because all French monarchs were coronated in the Rheims Cathedral, not at Notre Dame and not at Chartres either. So they believe that this moralized Bible was created for Queen Blanche. Again, this is just one page, the dedication page, which they believe, which is at the very beginning of the Bible. They believe, again, it was her and her son there. They believe that it was meant to be Paris and those buildings that are above them. They're kind of centered under these, what we would call ogive arches, which are those three-lobed arches. And then down below, we have the monks who are working, one on the written part and one on the visual part of the of this moralized Bible. So you have ink, you have tempera, and then gold leaf all on vellum, which is that calf skin. So we already kind of went through here. Again, you want to hit pause. You want to get down the name of the piece as well as the pieces of information that I have highlighted here in red. He is a teenager. Also, I didn't bring that up when Louis the Ninth becomes king, and he will. His mom is going to essentially, rule as his consort until he is old enough. And we saw that before with Hatshepsut. Except the only good thing is that Louis and Louis and his mother get along, and when Louis does take over, he will not try to get rid of his mom's legacy. So here we have from a different moralized Bible. It's called Scenes of the Apocalypse, and this is not from France. This one is from Spain, the city of Toledo, and Toledo is in the Castile region of Spain. So we're thinking, really, if you're thinking of Spain on a map, we are in the southeastern portion of the country. And like I said before, in moralized Bibles, you also had a couple of sentences or a sentence of text and then an image, and that's what we have here. So we kind of really have the end of days being present. So we've got these 8 medallions. They're derived and meant to kind of mimic the look of stained glass. You've got these 2 vertical columns of 4, and then each scene has a text with a summary of the event that's depicted in the roundel. So now on to another piece of religious imagery, but not Christian. Looks Christian if you look at it, but it's not. It's from the Golden Haggadah. And what it is meant to show is, and again, the Haggadahs were something that was meant to be read and looked at prior to Passover Seder. And it illustrates the story of the Jewish exodus from Egypt, all right, under Moses' leadership, and then the subsequent celebration of that exodus from Egypt. So Haggadah means narration. It fulfills the Jewish requirement to tell the story of the Jews and their escape from Egypt as a reminder of God's mercy to the Jewish people. So that's what we're seeing here. So it's used primarily at home. Ones that are used in synagogues wouldn't necessarily show the holy images, because just like in Islamic holy spaces, Jewish holy spaces, they're not meant to show religious figures. And it's meant to be read right to left according to the manner of a Hebrew text. So the story that's being depicted here is the moment when Moses tells the women and the families of Egypt that are Jewish, the plagues are coming, okay? And what's going to happen is God is going to take the firstborn male son of each household in the city or in the country. So what the Jewish people will do is they will take sheep's blood, they'll take that blood, and then they will smear it over their doorway so that God passes by them and knows that they are Jewish and they are saved from that. All right, and it's at that moment when the Pharaoh's son dies that the Jews will be essentially let go. They will leave, and they will cross through go across the not the Nile River, but they will cross the Sinai Peninsula, the Red Sea. They will part the Red Sea and go across. And here you see the images as well. If we start over here, we have the various plagues of the frogs and the locusts, the pestilence, the sicknesses. And then if you move over here, we have the people escaping Egypt. We have the parting of the Red Sea right there, all right? And then the Egyptian trying to come after, and what happens when the Red Sea closes on top of the Egyptians and they are completely submerged underwater. And again, it looks Christian, but it's not. it is the blending of the Jewish faith and then also Christian imagery. So now we're going to take a look at some Gothic art outside of France. So here we have what is known as the Rodigan Pietà. And the Rodigan Pietà it means the pity, and it is from the city of Rodigan, which is why gets that name. It's a wooden sculpture. We haven't seen too many of those before. And it's very, very emotional. So it is taking place, and it was created around the year 1300 to around the year 1325. If you get close to Mary's her tunic covering her head, pitted, which are remnants of wormholes, because worms had eaten into this, and that's one of the problems with why there's not a whole lot of wooden sculpture that lasts to today. And this would have stood on the top of an altar. So not that large. It's about 2 feet high, almost 3 feet. But we have these over-exaggerated facial features, which are meant for the congregants to see that Mary understands what you are going through in your life. She understands the sorrow of death. She understands the harshness of your life. So Mary, she gave her one and only child for the sins of humanity. He dies. He died this excruciating death, and we see this excruciating death with these thick thorn crowns that he is wearing. The blood is pouring out of the areas where he would have had the nail marks, and also the area in his chest where he would have been stabbed by a Roman soldier. So gushing blood. This would have been vibrantly painted. Some of the paint is still there. And it was meant for not only for you to have empathy for Mary, and again, she's acting as that throne again, but also for you as a congregate to understand that these sacred figures had also gone through hardships. So that's, the importance of this. And it's really, and this image becomes even more important when the Black Plague starts, because it's created before. It was not created for the plague, but it is a way to kind of show the idea of suffering and war that was taking place in Germany in the Rhineland in the early 1300s, because the plague won't hit until about 1365. And finally, we're going to look at a piece of architecture in England. It is called Westminster Hall, and it was built between 1097 and 1099. The ceiling comes a little bit later in the 1390s, but the hall itself was made out of stone and wood, and this is in London, England. And it is connected today to the current Parliament, and it's actually where the original Parliament of England was connected to. So it was started under William II as a hall in England at the time. It was meant for grand ceremonies and occasions, coronations. Later, it's used as a law court to dispense justice. The bare walls were probably decorated with tapestries to keep heat in. Originally, the windows placed high up kind of surround these Romanesque round arches, which are kind of hard to see here because the ceiling itself looks more Gothic because it has those pointed arches in wood. And the original roof was replaced, and there's a debate over how the roof was originally vaulted. Maybe the original vault would have just had straight beams that went across. They aren't 100% sure, but they know that they believe because of a fire, the roof was replaced, and that's where we get that Gothic roof. So when the old House of Parliament burned down, this was what all that remained. Okay, and this is one of the oldest democratic buildings in all of London, and all of England, and all of the world, really. And it's one of the only original parts still surviving from that original Parliament building. And the way that you would kind of talk about the style of this building, it was known as the hammer beam style, and that is the roof itself. So it's made of oak. The beams curve to meet in the center of the roof, just like a corbelled arch would in a stone cathedral. All right, and that takes us to the very end of Gothic art, and we are done this unit. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it was a little bit longer than we expected, and I will be coming back with you with the next video, episode 7 of Middle Age art, but in Italy, also known as the Pre-Renaissance. So thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're keeping up with your work. We're going to get through this, and